is a master's student in European Studies at the University of Passau. She is currently writing her master thesis at the share of Slavic literatures and cultures. The focus of her research is the analysis of the female screen image in Muratova's films, as well as its evolution throughout Muratova's activities as director. But the study aimed to identify how Kira Muratova, as a female director, portrayed female characters in contrast to male characters, and how her female perspective restructured the male gaze dominant in the cinema according to male gaze theory formulated by Laura Mulvey. The floor is yours, 20 minutes.
Introduction, I'll try. Microphone. Microphone. Thank you so much for the introduction and for the invitation to present my master thesis topic today. So I'll try to share the screen. Here it is.
And her title, I forgot to say, her title is Female Subjectivity in Brief in Caritas.
Yeah, currently I'm writing a master thesis on Muratova and on the role of women in Muratova's films, as well as on representation of women in her films from the perspective of her as a female director. And in today's presentation, I'm going first present the theoretical basis of my master thesis, which is male gaze theory. And second, I will talk on the analysis of the female subjectivities in brief encounters, which is also a part of my master thesis. So the theoretical basis is the male gaze theory. The concept of male gaze was basically developed by feminist film theorist Laura Mulvey in 1970s, as I'm sure many of you know. Her essay Visual Pleasures in Narrative Cinema elaborates on how the male gaze largely determines the filmmaking process and the viewer's perception of the male and female characters on the screen. Based on the study of film techniques and viewing pleasures, Laura Mulvey argues that films traditionally deliberately create masculine structures of looking. She distinguishes three gaze or looks. First, it's a look of the character, identifying the gaze of the male characters on women. Second, it's the look of camera that goes in the filming act, and though being technically neutral, is inherently male because the camera work is normally made by men. And this look, in my thesis, I consider the director look as the look of the camera, because the director directly manages the camera work as well. So also creates a certain perspective of looking. And the third look is the look of the spectator, who is presumed to be male and is put in the same position as the first two looks, identifying with the camera and character gazing at women. Laura Mulvey links the gaze to scopophilia as one of the key sources of pleasure to which cinema appeals. Scopophilia was studied by Freud and was defined by him as pleasure in using another person as an object of sexual stimulation through sight. Mulvey distinguishes active and passive pleasure in looking, and active component is traditionally considered to be male, with the men acting as subjects of looking, and passive component is attributed to the female, with the women being objects of looking. The woman is supposed to function as an erotic object for both the male protagonist within the story and for the viewer, and it is considered that her passivity is rooted in the patriarchal order and social structures that construct women in specific ways, reflecting the patriarchal unconscious. The man, on the contrary, is not subject to sexual objectification. His most important qualities do not relate him to being an erotic object, but rather to representing a more complete and more powerful ideal ego. He becomes an ego ideal for the man in the audience, and he gains his power by being able to control things rather than from his looks and sexuality. When the woman falls in love with the main protagonist, she becomes his property. And by means of identification with the male protagonist, the spectator can also indirectly possess her too. Thus, the narrative is controlled by the male character, who also is the bearer of the spectator's look. It is the male protagonist who drives the plot. In this manner, both visually and narratively, cinema defines women as an image, as a spectacle to be looked at and object to be desired. In my master thesis, I analyzed the ways in which Muratova in her films restructures the male gaze dominant in the cinema according to Laura Mulvey. My study focuses on the analysis of the female perspective in the representation of female characters in Muratova's films. Outlining the structure of female control based on Mulvey's theory, the study analyzes the ways in which Muratova's heroines are empowered to act as an agency and to drive the plot. The analysis starts with short encounters, and in today's presentation, I will elaborate on how the female characters are seen and presented in the film and why they actually act as subjects rather than objects of male gaze. Well, there is no need to, of course, to retell the storyline. It is a love triangle with city functionary Valentina and village girl Nade, who are in love with the same man, geologist Maxim. The peculiarity of the film is its complex structure and non-linear narrative structure. Events happen out of a chronological order. The plot timeline only can be reconstructed post factum after watching the whole film. A large part of the film is taken by 16 flashbacks, which describe the heroines' memories of their encounters with Maxim. Out of 3 timelines, 2 are given in the flashbacks, describing the story of Valentina and Maxim and Nadia and Maxim, respectively, and only 1 narrative refers to the present. This is the story of the heroines' relationship with each other. This story also is the only one that is presented in a chronological order. The flashbacks hardly have any connections to the events happening in the present. The recollections of both women are fragmentary. The order is built not on the sequence, not based on the sequence of events, but rather on how heroines recall them, and their memories are evoked by objects and sounds from their everyday life that connect them to Maxim. For example, it's a guitar on the wall, a mirror, etc. The stories of the 2 women only slightly touch in the present, and the only touch point of their memories is Maxim, who actually never appears in the real time. He's an elusive character here, the dream man who is never there. He only exists in the memories of both heroines, and his voice only comes to picture twice, on the tape recording and over a telephone announcing his soon arrival. Thus, he embodies an absent man, an object of both women's desires. Valentina has a complex personality, although her life seems settled. Her inner world is full of confusion. Yes, she has this good position, but her settled domestic personality is in conflict with Maxim's free spirit. She's bossy and impatient with his absence. Partially, it can be explained by her managerial position. Although she constantly moves from public into private, she's unable to successfully balance between the two spheres. Her work requires certain masculine traits such as assertiveness and bossiness, which she actually brings in her private life. These traits are inherent in her personality, and it makes her unable to fit into a generally accepted image of femininity. People around her do not perceive her as a woman. For example, there is a scene when two workers are talking about her after negotiations over the water system, and they discuss, one of the workers says, she's still a woman, and the other, a woman, she's not a woman, she is an executive, она ответственный работник. Maxim also reproaches Valentina for her obsession with work. In one of the conversations, he says to her, "Ты у меня маленький, но тоже начальничек." Well, you are small, but still a boss for me. He feels discomfort because in the relationships, she treats him as her subordinate. When he offers her to leave her job and follow him, she rejects his offer because she does not want to leave her work. Valentina is not ready to make any concessions, but still she requires that he always be at her side. She is portrayed as a woman, emancipated and independent in public discourse, but lonely and unhappy in her desire to find a balance between the social, her career, and the intimate, the family. She is educated, practical, and financially independent, but lonely and detached from femininity. She is torn between work and personal life and unhappy herself. She all the time demands something from people around her. She develops latent traits of a tyrant in her, and this image of a female tyrant will be developed by Muratova in her subsequent films. But here in Short Encounters, this image is only incipient in Valentina's character. Nade is in many ways the opposite of Valentina. She comes from the village and has little education, played by the young Nina Ruslanova. She, in her country simplicity and her naive love for Maxim, embodies femininity. In terms of her appearance and style, her image evokes associations with the Soviet image of Kolkhoznitsa. As she enters Valentina's house wearing a scarf over her head. And yet her behavior and her psychology hardly correspond to this Soviet cinematic type that her appearance resembles that so much. Her relationship with Valentina, among other things, also shows the difficulty of accurate reading of her character, because Valentina does not actually truly understand her or her true reason for coming to town. Her character is semantically connected with silence, and Valentina misinterprets this silence as a sign of helplessness and naivety. She does not consider her as a woman or a rival, and only in one scene, when she returns from the hairdressers on the day of Maxim's supposed arrival, she sees Nadia, who also styled her hair and dressed up, and she's speechless in front of the transformed Nadia, and her speechlessness is a sign of disempowerment. And Nadia's silence, Nadia is also silent, but her silence is rather the sign of strength in this case. As the film develops, Nadia shows herself as a courageous and defiant character. She's not afraid to speak her mind in spite of the status differences between her and Valentina. She raises the tape with Valentina's speech and openly confronts her, saying it's all rubbish, thus reproaching the latter for being hypocritical. By exposing Vala's hypocrisy, Nadia is placed in the position of moral superiority. At the end of the film, she also demonstrates her maturity when she does not wait for Maxim but leaves. She understands that Valentina truly loves Maxim and accepts their relationship. She is able to show sympathy and female solidarity. Nadia's relationship with Maxim is also strikingly different from that of Vala. Nadia and Maxim value silence and do not voice their feelings for each other. Unlike Valentina, Nadia does not make any demands on Maxim, but it's just enough for her to be near to him, to be close to him, and to do small things for him, like mend his jacket. They do not voice their feelings for each other, but rather they discuss unrelated topics. Their ties are unspoken. Muratova depicts in short encounters both women's emancipation power through the strength of their character. Both women are in their own way self-sufficient and independent. For example, Valentina likes her job and she radiates confidence in relationship with both with Maxim, with Nadia at her workplace. And Nadia also has her special strength. In spite of her sensuality, she is firm and down to earth. And at the end of the film, as I already mentioned, she leaves the house. She liberates herself from unfulfilled romantic dream of Maxim. And at the same time, Valentina goes to the conference. The house is empty. Women who carry the emotional burden of waiting throughout the film are liberated from it. And this can also be interpreted as a deconstruction of patriarchal order that prescribes that women are doomed to wait for the man. Within their memories, the women's perspective reflect their relationship with Maxim. The male hero, in turn, is the embodiment of Soviet masculinity. He has a high status profession of a geologist. Although he is in the center of the love triangle, not a single flashback represents his perspective, and no narrative reflects his look on or presents the woman through his gaze. His image is reduced to his charm. He's never seen in real time. The on-screen gaze is located only within the memories of the female characters, which indicates them as the subjects of the gaze and makes it impossible for the viewer to identify with the male gaze. Thus, the women are empowered to gaze at him as an object, while Maxim takes a passive position. He exists essentially in either in their memories or as a voice on the tape recorder or on the phone, and has no influence on the development of events. He does not drive the plot. The relationship between two women come to the fore. The common patriarchal structures are broken. A man is not here, and the women carry on with their lives. The way both women look at Maxim also present him as an object of their gaze. We already discussed today this episode when Valentina, when he objects to Valentina looking at him under and examine him under a microscope. Let's take a look at this scene.
Я не хочу, чтобы меня разглядывали под микроскопом. Я не червяк. Если даже червяк, я все равно желаю. Нет, обязательно. Я просто интересно, приемный, интересно тебя смотреть. Что хочешь, чтобы я закрытыми глазами? Нет, закрытыми, здесь полузакрытым. Вот я живу с полузакрытыми глазами, мне хорошо. И отлично. Да-да. Не надо меня воспитывать, учить. Я уже совершеннолетний. Я закоренел, и все это бесполезно. Если ты меня любишь, ты должна на меня смотреть влюбленными глазами, слепыми. Давай целоваться и все прочее.
So as we see here, he rebels against her scrutinizing look, and he says that he does not want to be examined under a microscope. Instead, he suggests that she live with half-closed eyes and look at him with loving blind eyes. Another episode with Nadia. Also, we saw it today a little bit.
Ну и что ты на меня так смотришь? Ты на меня не смотри. Биологи народ ненадежный. Сегодня я здесь, а завтра я на Камчатке. Потом мало еще. Так что ты на моей дороге не встречайся. Поняла? Поняла.
So as we can see from these both episodes, he understands, he is aware that he's being looked by both women, and he opposes against this. He avoids being fixated by the female gaze. Thus, in short encounters, Muratova very clearly established the female gaze and showed man's reluctance to be its object. In the film, the women act as bearers of look, and they try to get to know Maxim, who he is through looking at him, but also through touching him. Especially it's clear with the from Valentina's flashbacks. Let's take a look at another small episode. Oh. Back.
Точно ты совсем не знаю. Вот ты лежишь. Вот ты лежишь, я тебя вижу. Вот я вижу вот твои глаза, твои щеки, твои губы. Уши, волосы и нос. Да. Уж его ты, может, я все знаю. Вот тебя я не знаю совсем. Вот ты лежишь, о чем-то там думаешь, о чем-то, да? О чем ты думаешь? Ты просто спишь, да? Спишь?
Ни о чем я не думаю. Тебя это удивляет? Ты, наверное, всегда о чем-нибудь думаешь.
Yes, so she's looking at Maxim, but also simultaneously she touches the parts of his face that she mentions. She looks and gets to know him not only through her eyes, but also through touch. The visual and tactile are inseparable. Through look and touch, the heroine gains the power to put Maxim under the gaze and thus objectify him. So, as Susan Larson stated, years before Mulvey's article, Muratova structured brief encounters in the way that revealed the gaze as an opposite of what Mulvey defined as the male gaze. Women own the gaze and they are empowered to act as an agency. It is their memories and their perception of the situation that is passed on to the viewer. Throughout the narrative, the film elaborates a specifically female subjectivity and articulates female perspective. Moreover, Muratova not only subtly expressed protest against existing structures in film reinforcing patriarchal order, but also showed her ability to organize the narrative and in a very complex way. And she showed her disposition to non-compliance with the formal and narrative expectations. Thank you very much for your attention. Here you can see the sources that I used